He's not been back for a couple weeks, and I miss him. I miss talking to him, and I miss getting his perspective, his informed and experienced perspective on what's going on in the economy, what's going on in politics and government, solutions, ideas we should be looking at. And today we're going to talk about this tremendous burden, this sad and embarrassing burden we've not only put on our country, but on posterity going forward, our children, our grandchildren, and how it dramatically will affect what we call our American way of life. And that is former Congressman Joe DioGuardi is with us. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, Curtis. Nice to be on your show again.
And great to have you back. Thanks for making the time. Just recently, you have, not recently, you have been speaking across the nation, of course, and you continue to do that. But in particular, you brought to my attention that you spoke at the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania, my old home state, and to the students there. And your topic was about the crisis we now face with what you call the debt bomb. And I thought today you could take time and walk us through this, what you brought to their attention and the details and the background you brought out in this particular presentation.
I'd love to. I also modify the presentation when I give it to high school juniors and seniors because although when you're in the Wharton, you're dealing with some smart graduate students there, so you can't deal at the same level. But it's the same message because it's their generation that's going to have to deal with the debt that we have not paid off and seem to be just accumulating year by year. In fact, if you look at last year's budget, you'll see that we ended up with another $1.3 trillion in deficits. What's the deficit, Curtis? That's what we spent that we did not raise in revenue, mainly tax revenue. And that is something that's continuing. In fact, if you look at President Obama's budget and his plan, we don't balance the budget until 2022. And even then, we're only balancing, there's a deficit, but it's 3% of our gross domestic product. There's still a deficit. So there's really not a balanced budget at that point. But they consider that to be okay as long as our deficits are not more than 3%. I don't think we run our households that way, but that's the way they're running the government. Now, why is this an important issue, and why do I feel like that this is a key point that I have to bring across America, especially the young people? Because the debt is really a ticking time bomb. And I put that in a PowerPoint presentation. I had a fuse and I had a big bomb, and I wanted them to see that in color. And underneath that was a subcategory called the fiscal unsustainability of the West. That's mainly the U.S. and Europe. The trigger on that bomb is really interest. Why do I say that? Because we've created an artificial situation through monetary policy. Fiscal policy, what is that? To define it easily, it's what we tax and what we spend. That's our fiscal policy. That's controlled by the Congress of the United States of America. Monetary policy basically is not controlled by the Congress. They can invite Mr. Bernanke there and the Federal Reserve chairman from the regions, but basically that's an independent agency. Now, what do? Monetary policy is setting interest rates and is determining what the size of the money supply should be if everything else fails. And everything else has failed. But now it seems like the Federal Reserve is failing because we have created such an artificially low interest rate, and we don't know when to let the market take over. It's like price controls again. We had those under Nixon. We almost had a real catastrophe in trying to get the real markets back. That was back in the 70s. Well, we've created now a price control, and that's the price of money. It's called interest. So there's a problem. Now, why is this important, Curtis? It's important because if we are not economically strong, we cannot be militarily strong. And if we're not militarily strong and we let countries, for instance, China, in 10 years, take the number one position from us, can we entrust that country to do what we've done? Not that I want to see us be the watchdogs to the world or the policemen to the world, but we have done a pretty good job in creating security around the world because of the size of our military. And if it turns out that we don't succeed in keeping our economic strength and we have to reduce our military to what I would call unsustainable levels to keep our number one, then what do we risk? We risk increased regional conflicts. What could they be? Well, Russia could start rearing its head again on the Caucasus, on Georgia, Belarus, and Ukraine. We now have a former KGB guy in charge of Russia again. That's Mr. Putin. He won. That's the way he thinks. I think he's thinking about coming back with a mini Soviet Union. He wants to see Russia become more powerful. He doesn't like the fact they dismantle. So that could be a problem. Taiwan could become much more vulnerable to China if we lose our number one status, especially to China. Israel, oh my God, it's in the press every day, but it will obviously become more vulnerable to its Arab neighbors. Afghanistan could become a base for international terrorism. We're going to leave it. We know that. Pakistan is already nuclear. It could become a nuclear Iran, which will be very militant in terms of the Islamic profession and anti-West. And obviously, overall, you're going to have increased nuclear proliferation. That's the danger of us not maintaining our economic supremacy. So it's not just Joe DioGuardi, a CPA, trying to talk about balancing the books and being dismissed, as I was so many times by my colleagues 25 years ago when I raised my voting card, that plastic card, and put it in their nose and said, hey, you have made your voting card the most expensive credit card in the world. There's no limit to it. Since there's no term limits, it's unlimited what we're doing with this, raising the debt ceiling all the time, and we're putting the American dream in jeopardy. Well, that is going on now in spades. We've had 4 years, Curtis, of deficits above $1 trillion. Last year was $1.3 trillion, as I said, and Obama's budget that he's proposed for fiscal year 2012 is another $1 trillion.